Next update on the Bullet, and I'm in the process of doing the Helicoil. There's the Helicoil kit there and the various components. Now I've already drilled out the hole. What I did was I made a guide from some stiff card rolled around the diameter of the drill and then expanded just slightly and taped in place like so. And then what I did is I placed that over, because if you take a cutting so that you're using a smooth edge of the card, you know that it's flat, it's perfect 90-degree sort of angle, and then you lay that flat around the head, and I used that to slowly start off the drill and just get that sort of going in the right orientation. And then I'm doing exactly the same thing for the tap. As you can see here, that's the tap part way in, starting to cut the threads in, and I did exactly the same thing there, just made that slightly wider, hold that in place, put the tap in, and then wind it in, making sure that you're keeping it as centered as you possibly can. This ensures that when you put your insert in, your spark plug is going to seat squarely and get a good seal. So to drill the hole, I use this behemoth of a drill here that I was fortunate enough to borrow. The reason being, the shank of this drill is 14.3mm, just like the rest of it. Now that is a problem, in as much as most drill chucks, standard drill chucks like mine, want to go up to a 1/2 inch, which is just slightly too small to accommodate that drill. Now you can buy 14.3mm drills with a turn down shank for about a tenner. I would recommend to anybody doing it that you actually do that. Ideally, of course, if a drill press is the best option. If you can put it on a drill press, position it so it's absolutely dead on square, and then use your drill bit to drill down, you know it's absolutely square in that case, and you can then place your tap in the drill press, turning that by hand to tap it in and make sure that that's square too, and that's the way you're going to be most accurate. Of course, for the home mechanic DIY like myself, you've kind of got to make the best of it, do what you can. Now this, for example, if you could get a piece of copper sleeving, then that would work better than a roll of stiff card. Obviously be very careful if you're putting the drill in there and you're holding that. It's not so crucial with the tap because you're turning that by hand. So a little bit of ingenuity required in some circumstances, but on the whole it's fairly doable. But I would certainly recommend using a smaller drill with a turn down shaft, because it's just far easier to handle and manage. As I say, this thing was so big and heavy when you're trying to hold it straight and drill straight and true as well, and trying to hold the head still, quite complicated, as you can imagine. So I'm just in the process now of cutting the threads in for the insert. I'm using a 10mm spanner to turn the tap, because I don't actually have a tap handle that big. I have a tap and die set, but I don't have any taps of that size. And then after that I'll be fixing the insert in. I'm just going to put a drop of oil, just ordinary sort of engine oil or gear oil in this case, to lubricate the cutting of the threads. So I'll be back in a moment. Try and give you a quick eyeball of what's going on here. At the same time, trying not to get too much oil and cack over my camera, which is easier said than done. But basically, a little bit of lubricating oil on the threads and down the channels there. The channels are where the swarf is swept up from, but essentially it's kind of tricky to do while I'm holding this, but what I'm going to try and do is show you what you're doing there. Is now that's kind of dug in well enough, I don't really need the guide, so I can just demonstrate with a couple of turns. So you're turning a couple of short turns and then backing off, just to clear the swarf. And it's kind of tricky to show you, but basically what I'm doing is a couple of sort of half turns, back off half a turn, blow the swarf through, a little bit more lubricating oil, and just do that, work your way through gradually. Don't try and cut it dry, because the oil will actually help clear the swarf and it will make a cleaner cut on your thread. So hopefully that's sort of clear enough to show you exactly what's happening there. That's the tap, which I've run right the way through to make sure I've got a good clean cut, because these taps, anyone who's used a tap and die before will know that they're tapered. Now if you can see in there, it's actually very close to the seat, the valve seat for the exhaust, but with the exhaust being smaller than the inlet, it shouldn't actually interfere with it, it should be fine. And this here, just to give you an idea, this is approximately half of the swarf generated by the tap alone. Note specifically just by the tap. There's some more stuck on there. I've actually removed the tap during the cutting process a couple of times and cleared the swarf off on this rag. So this, as I say, you're probably looking about half a gain. Now this is just the tap alone. The swarf generated by the drill bit is larger chunks, and although it's only aluminium and relatively soft, this is precisely why I would always recommend that you take a cylinder head off to helicoil it rather than do it in situ, because these little chips of things get absolutely everywhere. It's quite easy for a couple of them to get embedded around the rim of your valve seats, making your valves not seal properly, working the way down the sides of the piston, you know, all kinds of things. So while they shouldn't damage anything in there because you've got steel liners and steel piston rings and so on and so forth, it's really not worth risking, especially when the head off process is a simple one. So so that's that. So the next step now is to wind the tap out after I've cleared some of this swarf from the end pieces there. Wind the tap out and run it through again just to make sure it's all clean once I've given it a wipe over, and then clean out the new threaded hole and fit the helicoil insert. To clean it, I'm just going to use some petrol, some old petrol that I have sitting around for this particular purpose, and a brush. Any old brush will do. This is actually a new one, but just a cheap paintbrush, which is perfect for this kind of thing. And then I'm going to blow it clean with the airline. Although being petrol, it evaporates quite quickly, but the airline will just help clean it off. It's sitting in a tray on top of some newspaper just to protect the mating face there. And as I said, basically I'm just going to have at it with the brush and petrol, and then I'll be putting in the insert. So I'll be back in a moment. Okay, that's the cylinder head cleaned up, ready for the helicoil insert. Fresh spark plug sitting here waiting to go in, gapped correctly at 0.46, well 0.5. A tight 0.5 mil. Just to give it an extra bit of security, I'm going to put a dab of thread lock on the insert. And I'm just going to show you the insert so you can see what it looks like, and hopefully I'll be able to get this to focus so you can see that. There we go. Now basically you can see that what it is a steel spring, as you can see, like so. And you can also see how much it compresses. If I demonstrate by putting the thread of this brand new spark plug into it, and as you can see it just drops straight in there. It's the spring actually compresses as you wind it in, which gives it the facility to lock itself into the old thread or the new thread hole that you've cut, the wider thread hole. Once it's in and you've broken off the tang, it basically expands on itself and grips the hole and becomes a permanent fixture, and then the internal part is then the correct diameter for your spark plug. So I'm just going to go ahead and get my insertion tool, which is a fancy little T-handle thing with a slot in, and you pop that in. Let's try and see this viewfinder's flipping, there we go. You pop that in this way around with the tang at the bottom so that it twists in that way and tightens. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a few dabs of thread locking compound onto this, which will help it stay in place. Well, that's the plan anyway. As I say, I've never actually had one of these come out on me, but you can't be too cautious. So that's all in place. Place it over the plug hole, and then you kind of have to press it in and start winding until it finds the first thread and starts biting in, which is easier said than done. There we go. You can feel when that bites in and it starts to wind in. You can tell when it's going where it should be. And so what's happening as you're winding this, and I'm just going to take that out so you can kind of see down there. I don't know how well you can see that, and just maybe try and get a close up. There you go. And you can see it's not quite fully wound in at that. There's still a little bit sticking out the top. But you wind that until the upper one is just below the surface. Now obviously with the spark plug hole as well, what you need to do is check that it's not protruding too far below. Okay, I just had to restart that because it wouldn't refocus for some reason. So okay, so yeah, as I say, I'm winding that in now. What I'm going to do is just go back to my insertion tool and wind in the last few threads until this goes right the way and it's flush against the surface. Now what I want to do at this point is just flip this over and check. Now you can see that's right near the bottom of the plug hole there. Perhaps not so easy to see. Again, let me see if I can get up close. On the back end there's a couple of threads to go, but obviously towards the middle you can see it's right the way down, and that's about as far as it will go. So I'm looking at that. I'm just going to give it a little last tweak. So that's right down. I want to make sure that this part of the thread is right under so that the spark plug will get a good seal. By the way, with turning that just a tiny bit more, but I don't want to go too far because the last thing I want is this thing popping out of the bottom. Okay, and there you have it. Now, next step is to break off the tang. Break off the tang, you basically use this little tool, which is just a push, a drift, if you like. You can see that comes off at the bottom there, and it just drops out, like so. And there is your new insert. And then what you can do is take a spark plug and just twiddle that in and check that. Now, I'm not going to tighten it right the way up, and basically want to leave it until the thread lock has time to cure. Have a quick check around, make sure that that's pretty square and true, which it is. And of course once you can see there, get that in view, and then once that's had time to cure, a little bit of copper grease on your threads of your spark plug as you normally would, nip that in and just nip it down, and there's one repaired spark plug thread. And of course, as with everything with spark plugs, I see so many people yanking the things down way too tight. All you need to do with a spark plug is just nip it up. You're just looking to get a seal. Now the first time you tighten it, this washer will squash. Subsequent times you take it out, check it, clean it, put it back in. You don't need to tighten it anywhere near as much, and you'll feel when it wants to stop. Literally just give it a little nudge at that point. That's tight enough. Don't worry about torque settings, and don't worry about yanking it round or all this business about quarter of a turn, half a turn, all the rest of it. Just snug it up until it's tight. Okay, so that's putting a helicoil into a cylinder head. In this case on the Enfield 350 Bullet. Next step for me is going to be lapping in the valves. I'll do a little video on that, and then I'll be reassembling the whole thing. Thanks for watching.